All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then we'll just add people as they come in. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dean Hebel. I'm the Executive Director of 10 at the Top, and we serve as the coordinator and convener of the Upstate Air Quality Committee. Have for now 12 years, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We are one of the air quality coalitions of SCDHEC, and you will hear from them in a few minutes as well. You can see our agenda for today. We have a jam-packed hour, so very excited about it. And what I'm going to ask everybody to do in terms of questions, so we can keep things going, is if you have questions for any of the speakers, please put them in chat. And then when they are done with their portion of the program, they can answer those as chat responses. And then once we're done, if we have a couple minutes, we will maybe talk about some of those questions or answer some other questions. But I want to make sure we're respectful of everyone's time and also have a chance to give everybody a chance to ask questions specific to what might be of interest to you. So I am going to go ahead and start with a very brief context set for us. Justine, if you could go to the next slide. So the Clean Air Act, I'm sure you all are aware of, was enacted in 1970 under Republican President Richard Nixon, establishing the EPA, and their work in air quality now in the more than 50 years since then has really helped save many lives across our country. You can read that they estimate more than 200,000 early deaths are prevented annually in the upstate. And while asthma and breathing problems continue to be a challenge in our country, they have been significantly reduced since the establishment of the Clean Air Act. It also calls for standards to be regularly monitored and reviewed every 5 years. You'll hear from Mia in a few minutes that it has been more than 5 years since most of those have been reviewed, but they are in process now, and she will share an update on where that currently stands. So next slide, Justine. But it's important to understand that this issue, a lot of people talk about it, and we'll talk about it in a minute, as a business issue, but it is also really about public health. Clean air is critical to the health of our residents, whether here in upstate South Carolina or all over our world. You can see from the slide that a 2018 study estimates that air pollutants play a role in more than 3.2 million new cases of diabetes annually. The World Health Organization estimates millions of deaths every year where some element of air pollution is involved. And then in the upstate, we have about 7.5% of our population with some element of asthma. Next slide. But it is also a business issue and a stability issue for businesses, most specifically, because of the potential punitive elements of the monitoring by EPA. There have been times and places in our country where if they are out of attainment for extended periods, that the law does allow for some restrictions on the types of growth that they can have, building and a lot related to transportation and things of that nature. And so one case study that many people look at is Birmingham, Alabama, that lost over $5 billion of economic development and thousands of jobs when they were a non-attainment area. It took them about 30 years to get back into attainment and to where they now are stronger from a business standpoint. The estimate, and this is a number of years old, so it could now be even higher, is that if you are a non-attainment area, if you have a business or an industry that wants to grow, The additional costs above what the normal expenses would be is about 15%. So if you look at that in terms of BMW, when they had their $1 billion expansion a number of years ago, if you add 15% to that, that's another $150 million in costs. And anecdotally, they said if they had to do that, they probably would not have invested that $1 billion. So there is a business element and a reason that the upstate, like all communities, does pay attention both from a health but also from an economic stability standpoint to air quality. Justine, go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history, really dating back to the last 20 plus years in the upstate. In the early 2000s, the region was deemed, or very close to being deemed, a non-attainment area, and there was some work done in partnership, a compact between Greenville, Anderson, and Spartanburg. And at that time, they worked very hard on trying to mitigate some of the industry sources and those kind of things. So, and I'll talk in a few minutes about the work we did in the 2010s, but it was much more focused on mobile sources, because a lot of the work, the low-hanging fruit per se, around the pollutants for industries had been taken care of and in partnership in the early 2000s. Then in the last 7 or 8 years, the PM 2.5 monitor, and Mia will talk about the new standards of PM 2.5, but there was some issues in the upstate, and the Greenville County and the Greenville Chamber did a lot of work to help make sure the upstate did get within attainment, and it was deemed an attainment area in 2018, which again led and supported that stability issue. Next slide, please. So the Upstate Air Quality Advisory Committee that I referenced earlier was originally led by the Greenville County Planning Department, and they asked Tanita Top to take over as the convener in 2012, and we've served in that role since. And it's comprised of local governments, businesses, and nonprofits. I will say for the first 4 or 5 years, it was a little bit more formal in terms of participation and involvement, because as you'll see in a second, we were engaged in a lot of things. We were, again, close to being a non-attainment area in that time. The attainment levels were being tightened, and there was a lot of concern, but there was also a lot of great work that's been done during that time. We are a liaison of the South Carolina DHEC Bureau of Air Quality that you will hear from in a few minutes, and we're one of 7 designated regional advisory committees in South Carolina. Next slide. So very briefly, I'm going to mention some of the things with Clean Air Upstate. That was a campaign we started in 2012, and as I mentioned, it focused on mobile sources for future emission reduction impacts, because a lot of the stationary sources had been focused on earlier, and there were really 2 areas we engaged with. One was education and outreach, and the other was creating specific strategies for reducing emissions from on-road sources. And I'll touch on a couple of those in a minute. The program was specifically active from 2012 to 2016. And since 2016, we have primarily been in maintenance mode. We try to have annual meetings of this group. We've had a couple of clean air workshops, and there are still always some elements and things to be paying attention to. We do regularly submit things that DHEC and EPA sends us across to those who are interested around air quality in the upstate, and we want to make sure that the issue remains something we're paying attention to, because as the standards get tighter, when they are evaluated by the federal government, we want to make sure that we are remaining within the attainment levels. And the good news is, at least in the 12 years I've been doing this. We reduced our levels a lot, and you'll see some of that numbers in a minute from Renee, and have continued to be well below what the standards are and what the potential standards are. And again, that helps stability in two ways. One, the public health, and then secondly, in our business and economic stability. And then, Justine, if you go to my last slide, these are some of the specific programs that we did as a region during that time frame. Again, and this is very important, that all of the work done in the upstate was voluntary actions and education. So we did not want to get in a situation where things were forced or mitigated on us punitively. And fortunately, as a region, we were able in the early 2000s with the compact, and then again in the 2010s, to do things that reduced our levels, and a lot of things that we maybe have no or limited control over that are positive, that have been going on in over the years in our federal policies and things as well. So some of the things we worked on were school Breathe Better, no idling program, no idling signage. You can see some examples of that. Some of that is still visible at various places. I was at Bon Secours Hospital not that long ago, and they still have no idling signs there. They're at a number of other places across the region as well. And then clean air tips through social media, WSPA TV, and our website. Then there was the J. Dan Powell electric charging station programs. Duke Energy provided a lot of financial support to help us do some of these things. And then the last thing was truck stop electrification, and a couple truck stops in the upstate, because idling trucks are big emission polluters. And so that was a big part of what we did as well. So that's just a very quick context set of examples of what we've done in the upstate and why we believe this is still an issue that we need to be engaging and focusing on. And with that, I'm going to turn it over, Justine, if you want to stop sharing, so Mia can either share or talk. Mia South is with EPA and is going to share a little bit. Mia, thank you for being with us. And I'll just start kind of setting you up by saying, as we said, the air quality standards are supposed to be reviewed every 5 years. And I know you guys have been hot and heavy in doing that the last couple of years under the current Biden administration. And appreciate you taking a few minutes to share about where that stands and some of the programs that you guys engage with at EPA.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks for inviting me. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a quick update on the air quality for ozone and PM, and then talk to you a little bit about the advanced program. So yeah, this is what I'm planning to cover. What's the latest with ozone and PM, and then what is the advanced program, and then the focus now on PM and why you should care about PM. So that's what I'll be talking about. And Dean, if you could help me keep on track for timing, because I know we have limited timing, but
yes.
So anyway, okay, thank you. So for particulate matter, EPA did finalize a final rule in February 7th of 2024. The final rule was published today in the Federal Register. I've linked the final rule at the bottom, but basically it was lowering the primary PM 2.5 level from 12 micrograms per cubic meter to 9, based on scientific evidence that the current standard was not adequate. We're keeping the 24-hour PM 2.5 standard, and we're also retaining the primary health-based 24-hour PM 10 standard, and we're not changing the current secondary welfare standard. So that's kind of the latest. That was a reconsideration that just got finalized in February. So for ozone NAAQS, there's also a similar process coming up. And the latest on that is that EPA will be holding a virtual public science and policy workshop to get input from the science community and the public this summer, to inform the review. And the next step is that we will release 2 volumes of the integrated review plan, which lays out the agency's plan for review in the fall for public comment, and the Clean Air Act Science Advisory Committee consultation. So this is just a little bit about how the process works, but there's 3 volumes of the integrated review plan. The first one is a background document. The second one details the plan for the integrated science assessment. And then the third one details the plans for any quantitative risk assessments to inform the review. So the best way to keep in touch with this is to, look at EPA's website, but I will be informing the advanced partners about anything that I know about also as well. So that's kind of the air quality update. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat at all. I can't see that, but if there are, let me know. So the way that the advanced program works is that we are, and South Carolina is a partner of ours that have been from the beginning of the program, but it's a voluntary program that works with areas and all over the country, different sizes, different needs. But the goal is to keep them out of non-attainment. We want to keep their air clean and protect public health. And also we are conscious of, that areas want to be developing. And so how can they do that sustainably? So that's really what the partnership is about. And recently we've expanded that beyond the national air quality standards to also greenhouse gases and impacts on vulnerable communities. So this was before the climate pollution reduction grant. So it dovetailed very nicely with that grant program as well. So this is the goals that we're trying to meet. So it's really like how can, like what I just said about economic development in concert with sustainability, air quality, and public health. And so we have mainly focused on ozone and PM areas in the past, but it doesn't mean it has to be limited to ozone and PM in the future. We're exploring that now. But here's a list of our areas that we're working with currently. So we have 50 areas across the country, and most of these areas are local areas. But we have a few states like South Carolina, North Carolina, and Minnesota. But you can see like we have areas as small as St. Maries, Idaho, and then, like a whole state of Minnesota. So it really varies. You could be in the program for ozone or PM or both. And right now, with the PM standard just being finalized, we think we're definitely getting a lot of more interest from people in joining the program. But what's unique about these, the advanced program is that if you're in a non-attainment area with EPA, your relationship is kind of a 20-year long plus regulatory relationship with all these SIP requirements that you have to fulfill. In this program, our partners are using like a wide variety of measures to keep in attainment. So these are the type of measures that we're seeing in the plans that they give us, but it's wide ranging from transportation to energy efficiency, green infrastructure, et cetera. And so there's a lot of flexibility. And we're in a collaborative relationship with our partners versus a regulatory relationship. So we're able to offer technical assistance and help in this area. So these are some of the reasons why people join the program. And I'm not going to read through all of them, but we know that cost is a huge concern for areas. And we've had partners that have done cost attainment studies, mainly in Oklahoma and Texas, and they're estimating like $1 billion a year to be a non-attainment. So that is a huge driving factor, like Dean, like you were talking about earlier about the economic costs. But I think what I've heard most from partners is they like to be plugged in with EPA. They like the one-on-one time. We're able to offer our partners the latest information on tools and resources. And then another big thing that we provide is just a platform for getting, other areas together to share best practices. So between our tools, technical assistance training, and partner sharing, those are really, the core of what we do. And it provides areas of structure of how to work with us. And you guys are a perfect example of that. Like the state is involved, and then you have a group of coalitions that work together. And we are interested in actually looping in more coalitions. I think that would be a great direction to go in the future. So would love to continue the conversation on that. But one thing that we've done recently is we've streamlined our reporting process. So each partner's the goal is to provide an annual update every year. So we've moved this to basically a SharePoint list, which is similar to an Excel spreadsheet with a brief program description. But we are focusing on like what are the outcomes and impacts of the programs and projects you're trying to do, and what are the emissions reductions, et cetera. And so this database is available to all the partners. And so it's a great resource for those who want to, like, for example, if someone is interested in doing a solar ordinance, they would search in this database under solar ordinance and see what other partners have done things in the past. So they can just learn from the partners quickly. We've had partners share, for example, ozone public campaign materials that they developed and just said anyone who wants to use them can. So there's a lot of sharing, which is really helpful. So we do once a month trainings. And I think the database are two of the best things that we offer. In addition to, like, we've even branched out to other federal agencies. So we've had a couple of our partners work with NASA in their develop program. So here are the requirements. It's very easy to be a part of the program. The main thing you have to do is provide a path forward for 5 years and then an annual update, and have a stakeholder group. And then, the emphasis on PM with the standard just being final and designations like 2 years away. This is something that we're focusing on now because there's a 2-year lead time of like, what can an area do now to stay out of non-attainment? So we know it's a huge public health concern. And also it has a disproportionate exposure by vulnerable communities as well. So I get a lot of questions about, if you join the PM program, are you going to be protected from non-attainment designation? And the answer is no. But I think you'll have the best of what EPA has to offer on keeping you out of non-attainment. And anything you do, like the early, the better. And it also can be counted into your state implementation plan if you end up getting designated non-attainment later. So this is just some of the things I want to leave you with about how to evaluate PM in your area. And I've included, this is the new air quality index that was part of the PM final rule. They changed the breakout points for this column shows, what the previous breakouts were, and then they changed it to from 12 to 9, so the different categories. And you can find more on that fact sheet. But like, what can you do now? What is monitoring and modeling telling you about your PM levels? A lot of our partners are very close to not being in attainment because of the new standard. And then what impact specifically on vulnerable communities is PM having, and what can you do now to control your sources? So that's the conversation we would like to have with you if you consider joining the program. And we can have more than one partner per state. We do have, like in North Carolina, we have several different partners in North Carolina, including the state of North Carolina. So I would love to continue the conversation with you and hope that you will consider joining. At this point, I guess I could just answer any questions that have come up.
Well, I think, Mia, we're going to, if anyone has questions for you, they'll put them in the chat and you can answer them then. And if we have time at the end, we'll answer some specific questions. If you could please just put the Advance website and your contact information in the chat. That way we will be sending out the slides so people will have it, but they can get it quicker by having you put it in the chat right now.
Sure will. Okay, sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate asking you to give a lot of information in a short time. So I think very, very helpful. And as we transition into our partners from SC DHEC's Bureau of Air Quality, you saw there are only 3 states where the entire state is part of that, and South Carolina is one of them, and has been part of the Advance program, I believe, since like 2013 or 14. I remember having those conversations about whether we should join as a region or whether the state was going to do it when we first started coordinating the Air Quality Committee 12 years ago. So it was right around that time, and the state was very willing, even though at that time we were on the edge of non-attainment, and the York area, Rock Hill, was in non-attainment because of their association with Charlotte. The entire state, DHEC wanted to be kind of the conduit for the entire state, and remains that way. So you'll notice that when we send out information, it is kind of goes through that funnel. It comes from EPA, it goes through the state, and then they send it to us, and then we send it out to our partners and anyone. And I know some organizations on the call have submitted, if you have charging stations or other things that you've done, if you've changed your fleet out or different things, how that fits into the Advance program. So all that information, as you can see from Mia, is very important. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Renee and Amy from the SCDHEC Bureau of Air Quality to kind of share. Now we've heard the national perspective. Now, where are we here in South Carolina, and most specifically in the upstate, as it relates to our air quality attainment in 2024? So Renee, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So today I'm a data analyst with South Carolina DHEC. I work for the Bureau of Air Quality, and I'm going to just be sharing some graphs with you to show you where the 10 at the top area falls within the state of South Carolina, and how we're doing with criteria pollutants. And then I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and she's going to explain some of the initiatives that we have going on. So I'm going to, next slide, please. Okay, so what is ambient air? To begin with, whoops, can you go back? Can you go back to the, there you go. Thanks. Ambient air is the air that is outside of buildings. It's not indoor air. And as Mia explained, in 1970, EPA chose the worst pollutants, and they're called criteria pollutants. And these pollutants are carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, dioxide, ozone, lead, and 2 types of particulate matter, PM10 and PM2.5. So in order to monitor for these air pollutants, South Carolina operates monitors in monitoring sites throughout the state, and that's what this map shows. The colored areas are Metropolitan Statistical Areas, or MSAs, and as you can see, most of the monitoring sites are within the MSAs. That's because most of the pollution that we monitor for is caused by human activity. Now, the green circles are the monitoring sites that operate 1 or more monitors. For instance, in the 10 at the top area, there are 2 MSAs, Spartanburg and Greenville Anderson Greer, and each of these MSAs have their own monitoring requirements, and those are determined by population size, traffic, and what the Title V's, where they're located, and what the pollution they produce. So within these 2 MSAs, we have 5 monitoring sites in the 10 at the top area. Let's see, Spartanburg MSA has North Spartanburg Fire Station, which is noted as NSFS, and they monitor for ozone. And then TK Gregg site monitors for PM2.5. And then in the Greenville Anderson Greer MSA, the Garrison Arena site, which is in Anderson County, monitors for ozone. And then in Greenville County, the Hillcrest site monitors for ozone and PM 2.5. And the Greenville ESC site monitors for PM 2.5, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. So I know the burning question is, how are we doing? And a general answer is we're doing very good. We are in compliance with all of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS, which is the level of pollution that EPA has deemed as safe for most people. So I'm just going to quickly go through the 10-year graphs to show you where your area compares to South Carolina. And hint, you're looking pretty good, but we are keeping an eye on PM 2.5 and ozone. As a lot of people noticed last year, we had a lot of wildfire smoke, and we were concerned about that, and we're watching it this year. Also, in these graphs, I just have to put in a caveat that all of the 2023 pollution data, it goes through several quality assurance checks before it's submitted to EPA, and the final check will not be until May. So it's possible that some of the data might be changed, but honestly, it's not likely. Okay, so this is the 10-year graph for ozone. And at the bottom of the graph, you actually see how we calculate the design values. There are primary standards and secondary standards. And so we're going to focus on the primary standards because that is community health. Secondary standards are for the protection of animals, plants, and buildings. But generally, primary standards are more stringent. The ozone has primary and secondary NAAQS of 0.070 parts per million. And each pollutant is calculated just a little differently depending on its chemical characteristics. So the form that you see at the bottom tells you how we calculate the yearly value and then the design value. And it is the design value, which is usually 3 years of averages, that is compared to the NAAQS. So that's the big number. So on this slide, you can see that Greenville MSA is in dark green and Spartanburg is in purple, and both of them, as well as the rest of the state, are in attainment. Next slide. So, oops, go back here. So the PM standards, as Mia said, have just changed. And there are actually 2 PM standards. There's one for PM, there are the standards for PM 2.5 and then the standards for PM 10. For 2.5, there are 2 primary standards, a 24-hour and an annual mean standard. And these are the 2 ways that we calculate to be sure that the long-term and the short-term trends are accounted for. This one is the 24-hour PM 2.5 standard, and it was not changed. It is still 35 micrograms per meter cubed. And in this graph, Greenville MSA is in dark blue and Spartanburg MSA is in dark red. I hope you can see that. All of the monitors in South Carolina are in compliance. This is the, next slide, please. This is the second PM 2.5 primary standard. And this is the standard that did change. Before today, it was at 12.0 micrograms per meter cubed, which is the dotted line up on top. And today it was officially signed and dropped to 9.0 micrograms per meter cubed. The Greenville MSA is dark blue and the Spartanburg MSA is dark red. And as you can see, all of the monitors in the 10 at the top area and in South Carolina are in compliance. Also, you might notice that there are areas that are very close to the standard. We do have an issue with the Charlotte and the Augusta, but your area is looking good. Next slide. So this is our last PM standard. This is a PM 10, and this was not changed. It is still at 150 micrograms per meter cubed. And it cannot be exceeded more than once every 3 years. So it's what we call a yes-no standard. Either you did exceed it or you didn't exceed it. So since a blank graph is pretty boring, I graphed the second high values for each year. The Greenville MSA is in green, and all of the South Carolina sites have not been in exceedance for any of the last 10 years plus. Next slide. This is in nitrogen dioxide, or NO2. It has two standards, a 1 hour standard and a yearly standard. This is the 1 hour standard. And it has an hourly annual mean standard of 53 parts per billion. Greenville MSA is the blue line. And as you can see, your area plus the whole state is well below the standard. Next slide. This is the second nitrogen dioxide primary standard, which is the annual mean for the year. The Greenville MSA is the yellow line, and once again, all of the South Carolina monitors are well below the standard. Next slide. This is sulfur dioxide. It has one primary standard of 75 parts per billion. A Greenville MSA is the very bottom. It's the green line, and it is well below the standard. Next slide. So for carbon monoxide, there are two primary standards, an 8 hour and a 1 hour. The 10 at the top areas do not have any carbon monoxide monitors because carbon monoxide has historically been very, very low in South Carolina. We do measure it at the Park Lane site in Columbia, and it's the blue line, and it generally is not above 1. Next slide. Okay, this is the 1 hour standard of the carbon monoxide, and as you can see, it is also below 1. So we're in very good shape there. So in conclusion, the 10 at the top area is doing well, but we don't want to rest on our laurels because we are keeping an eye on both ozone and PM 2.5 because of the wildfires and the smoke issues. So now Amy is going to talk to you about some initiatives.
Thank you, Renee. Hey, my name is Amy Curran, and I work in the Bureau of Air Quality at DHEC. I'm the outreach coordinator for the Bureau. Anyways, you can see on this slide here is just a couple of programs that we have. Air Now, of course, is an EPA program. And some of the money for some of the grant programs are also coming from the EPA. And then we have our own in-house programs like the Breathe Better program, which supplies some of the turn off your engine signs. Next slide. So a little bit about the Breathe Better program. As most of y'all know, idling vehicles waste fuel and produces air pollution problems that can be harmful to human health, which is how the B2 program kind of came about was, you know, what can we do? How can we have a program? What can it represent for idling or anti-idling in the state? And so this is how the program came up with the campaign for providing signs for schools and also signs for businesses. And if you go to the B2 website, there's a lot more information like anti-idling policies that you can put into place. And there's some stuff for businesses to promote telecommuting. But anyway, you can go to those websites. I have them on some of these slides. And you can also get helpful resources for businesses and for schools. Next slide. And I just said something about the businesses. Jumping ahead of myself here, but anyway. Basically, if you have a high volume of visitors daily and you've got, you know, trucks unloading and loading in front of your business or around your business or even inside, you know, if you got like a carport area for trucks, they should not be idling. For a couple of reasons. One, idling is just not good for the environment. And two, the people that are in the building are going to be, you know, sucking in all those fumes when they're breathing. So in businesses, I think Dean mentioned one already. They can, you know, they're looked at as a leader when they're doing something good for the environment. So having a sign is a good way to do that. All right, you can go to the next one. So the sign up is really easy. You go to the website that's at the bottom of this slide, and then you just fill out an enrollment form and ask, you just let me know how many signs you need. And then, like I said, on that page, there's also a bunch of resources for your business. And then the next slide is just signs that people have around. One of them is the CMCOG, the Central Midlands COG. You can go to the next slide. So some other programs that are available is the DARE grant, and Sam Christmas, I see that he is on the call. He used to do that program at DHEC. But anyway, and it's still we still have the program, but we are looking for someone to run that program. Anyway, it's for many different things. It's a state program, national program, school bus rebates. There's just a lot of different things going on with that. Diesel Emission Reduction Act grant program is really good. Okay. And Mia, of course, has been on the call, and I oversee the coalitions as well. And I really need everybody to get me their reports, by the way. They were due on March 1st. So if you have any reports on projects that you're doing in your area, no matter how big or how small, or even if you're in the middle of them, please send me that information. All right, next slide. We also have a radon program where people can let us know if they want to test their home for radon. The only way to know if you have radon is to actually test for it. So this is another really good program that DHEC has. And then the last slide is my information and Renee Madden's information. And I'm just going to go back to something that Dean said about, like in York County and some places in the upstate, we did some lawnmower exchanges, car care events, excuse me, and other events to just pretty much for education and awareness. But those are the types of things that are going to keep us in attainment, or at least help keep us in attainment and help us maintain good air quality. And if anyone's interested in knowing more about those programs or having them in your area of the state, just let me know. Oh, and the Energy Office, I forgot, Sam's on the line. The Energy Office also has some good programs, and one is the Palmetto Clean Fuels Coalition. They do a lot of good things with emissions. Okay, I'm done now. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Amy. And again, if anybody has any questions for Amy or Renee, please feel free to put them in the chat. And before I turn it over to Alex, I'm going to share my screen real quick because I found a slide from presentation we did in 2015 when we were through with the ozone, or actually that DHEC did. This is the same slide. Remember the ones for ozone with everything in the low 60s. So I want you to see this, if you can see my slide. In the 2005 range, almost the entire state was above 70, and the standard at the time was 75, and most of the state was above that, including the upstate. And you can see the trend down that went around 2010, 2012, and lower. So, I just wanted to put some context in. The numbers look wonderful now, but if you, you may, if you have not been engaged, necessarily understand that there was a time when our region was nowhere near as good at air quality as we are now, and our state was not. So I really want to commend DHEC and partners here in the upstate and across the state for, we have seen a significant decline. And so as standards continue to tighten, it means, it's better for the health of our residents. And we just need to continue to be doing the things that we've done at various points in previous years. And with that, that's a great segue to Alex Butler with the South Carolina Office of Resilience, who is leading a new effort that is through some funding that came from the federal government as part of the COVID packages, to talk about reducing all kinds of pollutants and different environmental health issues in the United States. So Alex, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the Palmetto Clean Air Commission.
Thanks, Dean. Can you all see my slides?
Yes.
Just really want to first introduce the Office of Resilience to those that aren't familiar. We are a relatively new state office. We exist to lessen the impact of disasters on communities and citizens of South Carolina by planning and coordinating statewide resilience, long-term recovery, and hazard mitigation. So again, relatively new, started in 2015 after the devastating floods associated with Hurricane Joaquin, and then really started up as repairing and replacing homes, primarily primarily for low to moderate income folks. Right as we were getting going, hit again with Hurricane Matthew, Hurricane Florence. And as a result of that, Governor McMaster decided we needed to be more forward-looking when dealing with these flooding events, and that's how we got the Floodwater Commission, which ultimately led to the passage of the Disaster Relief and Resilience Act, which created our office, and we began official operations as the Office of Resilience in 2022. So we do three major things. We do resilience. We had to develop a statewide resilience and risk reduction plan with a couple of funds associated with that. We have a mitigation program that's funded by some HUD dollars, focusing on buyouts of folks in flood-prone areas, infrastructure improvements, plans and studies for communities that want to understand their flood risk, and some matching grants. And that's in a 17-county area, mostly in the PD coastal areas of the state. And then disaster recovery, again, that's our disaster recovery operations from those previous hurricanes. But just kind of getting into why I'm talking to you guys today, we started off with the statewide resilience plan, and that was just released this past June. I encourage you to go take a look at it, but really looking at a long-term risk assessment of the state, primarily focused on flooding, but really all hazards. And as part of that, we looked at our resilience and vulnerability, our current conditions, the current climate trends that we see statewide, how that translates into our flood risk and vulnerability, and also other hazards. And then look at how funding works in the state, and ultimately ended up with a series of recommendations. There's kind of 10 major themes of recommendations, but the way we got involved with the Palmetto Clean Air Quality Collaborative was really the last one, which is maximizing all available funding for resilience activities. And that kind of led us to this program. This was an EPA-funded program through the CPRG, Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, partnered with DHEC, who's the primary awardee, but we have kind of taken the lead in writing this. We have what's called the Palmetto Air Quality Collaborative, because the state loves its acronyms. So what is this group? It was established by the Inflation Reduction Act, administered by the EPA, focuses on helping states, tribal, and metropolitan areas reduce their greenhouse gas measures. Currently just started phase one about a year ago. That's a planning grant. Again, $3 million for the statewide effort, co-lead between us and DHEC, with Ports Authority as a sub-awardee. Some metropolitan areas also got awarded some funding. So Charlotte Metro, Columbia Metro, and the Greenville Anderson Metro area also got awarded funding to work on their metro plans for this. We had to develop a priority climate action plan, which was actually just turned into EPA last Friday. So that is available on our website. I encourage you to take a look at it. Really quick turnaround on this. And I know, unfortunately, this is the first time a lot of people have been hearing about this, but it was an incredibly fast turnaround on these to get them to EPA by the deadline. The reason for this is there's implementation grants available to implement the plan. Those applications are due April 1st. So we're currently working on that as we speak. But that's about $4.3 billion available nationwide, with grant awards ranging from $2 million to $500 million. So what's the purpose of the Palmetto Air Quality Collaborative? It's really to look at innovation. How do we reduce greenhouse gases and other air pollutants in South Carolina? We're trying to look at multiple benefits. So not just air quality, but also resilience, economic benefits as well. And then coordinate and collaborate as much as possible on these reduction measures. And, some of the benefits of this, which would probably apply to this group, cleaner air, improved public health, economic growth and development's been touched on already, enhanced resilience. A lot of the things we were talking about enhance our resilience as well, and reduce harm from extreme weather events and natural hazards. So the process that we've had is really a coordination of intergovernment agencies, public and stakeholder engagement. Public and stakeholder engagement was largely led by DHEC. And really, we formed a series of action teams focused on different emission sectors. So you see them there, really trying to develop some recommendations for what we should prioritize as a state for our priority action plan. Part of that was doing a greenhouse gas inventory for the state. We don't maintain a statewide greenhouse gas inventory. So we used the EPA's tools for this, and you can see how that's kind of broken down by sector. Transportation being our largest sector, electric power, second largest, and then industry. You see it step down. Do want to point out that this is all based on the source of emissions. So you notice that residential is really low, but in reality, it's we're using a lot of that electrical power in our residential areas. So it's not where the energy is ultimately used; it's where the pollution was generated. But I also want to point out, you see that we have, in addition to our emission sources, we also have sinks. So our land use and forestry activities that we have statewide are actually a really good carbon sink for these pollutants, and it really lowers our net emissions. And so that's another thing we wanted to focus on, is enhancing those sinks statewide. So each of the action teams came up with different recommendations, and I'll send this slide out because I know we don't have time to read. Everything from the transportation sector to increasing public transit, alternative fuels, electrification of ports and rail, industry sectors with energy efficiencies, and some additional monitoring, things we can do to commercial and residential buildings for weatherization, electrification, that sort of stuff. Agriculture, expansion of some climate smart programs that already exist, and looking at ways we can enhance our sinks with agriculture, and then waste programs administered by DHEC. Can we minimize the amount of waste going to landfills and capture some of our gases that way? And really, thinking about the monitoring of these at sites. Well, there's my email. Let me get back. Sorry, y'all, just closed on me. Dean, can y'all see that now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So the priority measures that we've landed on, that were in our priority climate action plan, focused on land conservation and restoration. As y'all are well aware, in the upstate, one of the fastest growing states in the country, we're losing a lot of our natural and working lands to development, and some of them are really good carbon sinks. And so we think a really cost-effective way to reduce carbon is actually to capture it with our natural and working lands. Climate smart forestry and agriculture. There's a program existing through Clemson and SC State that's funded by the NCRS, really focused on enhancing carbon uptake from our working lands, our forest and agricultural lands, through incentivizing landowners. It's an effective way to increase carbon capture. Residential weatherization and energy efficiency. There's a lot to be gained by reducing the demand side of the equation here, and we could do that with some weatherization and energy efficiency. And particularly focused on low to moderate income folks who may not have the means to do that, and whose homes are often the least energy efficient. Some programs focused on organics recovery and food waste capturing. Those would, again, try to capture some of those waste headed to landfills. Some programs focused on transportation with transitions of fleet vehicles, as well as looking at alternative and multimodal transportation. Can we incentivize some projects to get folks off the road? And then looking at our industrial side with sustainable supply chains, energy efficiencies, whether that's switching off of diesel-powered boilers to electrification or some alternative fuels, or simple things such as multi-speed motors that can increase our efficiencies, and finally our transportation and logistics. So with that, just a quick where we're at. Again, we just submitted the Priority Climate Action Plan. I'll send out the link to that. It's on our website. I encourage you to take a look at it to see what our priorities were listed as. Working tirelessly right now on the implementation grant, so we can get it to EPA by April 1st. Meanwhile, we'll continue to work on developing a comprehensive climate action plan. So we'll likely be hearing more about this as we move forward with that planning process. And then with a final status report due in 2027. So I'll encourage you to connect with us on our website, and also our program manager, Kirsten Lackstrom, and Program Coordinator Amanda Rahimian, both of who could not attend today, but I'll make sure and share their contact information with Dean, and he can pass it along.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex. And I think a couple takeaways there. One is most certainly that there's now a month to apply for the grants. And so that's something that tell me how a community or an organization that wants to be part of those, what do they need to do at this point, if anything?
Yeah, at this point for the statewide grant, I think we're pretty too far down the road to add any additional specific projects. There will be, the way we're kind of writing up the implementation grant is to set up some kind of sub-grant programs that would run through our office and make some grants available to communities for multimodal transportation and some of the energy efficiency stuff. And so that's still under development, but there would be kind of once, if we were notified by EPA that we were awarded a statewide grant, that money would then be funneled out through the kind of sub-grant program that we're setting up. There's also the opportunity with the metropolitan areas, they may be considering putting in grants. So contacting with them and see what they're intending to put in for the grant program. Unfortunately, yeah, it's just super short timelines were given to us by EPA on this one.
But and let me, I think from when you and I talked earlier, just to put this context for everybody, my understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that you've determined the areas that or types of projects that will be granted if South Carolina gets money, but not exactly what those projects are. So once if we do get money, individual communities, organizations that have something that fit within those areas can then apply for the sub-grant, right? So they haven't missed anything as it relates to an individual opportunity for a community or a business or whatever here in the upstate at this point, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's going to be a couple different grant programs that everybody would be eligible for, or governments would be eligible for. There's going to be a couple things that are in there that are kind of specific to sectors. So again, the climate smart agriculture, that's building on an existing program at Clemson. So Clemson would be a sub-awardee through that. But for the most part, the big kind of grant stuff would run through and then be sub-awarded out. So it would be available as soon as we have that program nailed down.
Great. And so we hope South Carolina gets lots of money for that. And we will continue to stay connected with you and with the Office of Resilience so that if and when South Carolina gets money, we can share that with the organizations in the air quality group here in the upstate, if anyone does fit for the grants. And as you mentioned, Greenville Anderson area has some funds separate from this as well. So Alex, if you can send me your slides, we will add them to our follow-up email and we will get that out to everybody. So we are at time, which is not a surprise with all the data and information, but I think a couple of takeaways for everyone as we go. First is the grant program that we mentioned. And then secondly is the advanced program through EPA and SCDHEC. If your organization or your community does anything that would that sees a reduction in some levels of particulates, whether it be PM 2.5 or ozone or any of the pieces, we regularly send out that the way that you can then log in to the advanced tool and put in your information. We will send that out again. But we encourage you to do that because that's how they track what's going on in communities that help with reduction of emissions. And we will continue. We plan on having at least one more air quality meeting this year, and perhaps some initiatives to start looking at as we look at exactly where we fit with 2.5, PM 2.5, and then ozone. We are under, which is great, but we are a lot closer to the top than where we were before. So we definitely as a region need to be paying attention to that. So again, I want to thank all of our presenters today and thank everyone for taking time to be with us. And I hope you have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.